As tensions mount on college campuses and anti-Semitism increases around the world, we want to take a moment to explore where that comes from and what can be done to fight hate. Our next guests are combining their talents to do just that. Emmanuel Acho and Noa Tishby are co-authors of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, out now. Emmanuel is an analyst and host for Fox Sports, a former NFL linebacker, and host of the Uncomfortable Conversations series on YouTube. His previous book, Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man, was a New York Times bestseller. Noa Tishby is Israel's former special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and delegitimization. She's the producer behind In Treatment on HBO. And her previous book, Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. Emmanuel, Noa, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. I know, Emmanuel, you joined us virtually for Conversations with the Black Man, which is one of our favorite shows we'd ever done. We aired it multiple times because we loved it so much. So it's great to have you both here and to have this important, uncomfortable conversation right now. And Noa, Emmanuel deserves credit because he was way ahead of everybody on this. This was not an October 7th, let's talk about this issue. He called you like over a year before that.
Emmanuel deserves literally all the credit for the existence of this book. The entire thing was his idea, his actions, his initiative. Emmanuel called me about 2 years ago, so about a year and a half before October 7th happened, before anything that's happening on college campuses, when he called me and asked me if I wanted to do this book with him, and I couldn't have said yes faster.
Right, and what were you seeing that other people weren't seeing?
I saw people making statements that were naturally anti-Semitic intentionally and making statements that were incidentally anti-Semitic because they had no idea what they were saying. Right. So instead of just navigating my life ignorantly, I said, wait a second, let me ask these questions, not just in a safe space, but in a real space. Let me talk about and ask about Jewish people in power, Jewish people in money. Let me ask, hey, are Jewish people white? Let me ask you and press, am I anti-Semitic just because I don't agree with Jewish people? Like, let's really go there. Some of the chapter titles, so are Jews white? Why did the Jews kill Jesus? Let's talk about
Jewish...
Did
the Jews kill Jesus?
Did the Jews kill Jesus?
Because we agree that they didn't, or maybe they did, and if they didn't, it doesn't matter.
But even the reason I say it in that manner is because there's the perception that the Jews killed Jesus. And based upon theology and all these things, let's unpack all of it. So, like, let's really go there.
And everywhere, which was really fun, and there's nothing that he could have said in that process that would have been offensive to me. Nothing.
What is anti-Semitism?
I love this question. All right, so anti-Semitism, first of all, it's one word. It's not anti-Semitism. It's not two words. It's not hyphenated. It's not capitalized. It's like a word, any other word. So anti-Semitism is specifically for its Jewish hatred. Anti-Semitism is a little bit more complicated because it is a shape-shifting conspiracy theory. So it's a shape-shifting conspiracy theory such that it changes every couple of years, right? The goalpost moves, and every couple of years it looks a little bit differently. So it attributes to the Jews, not just like we're so much better than them, right? But also mythological powers, like this cabal, insinuating that the Jews have some sort of a controlling hand, and there's like, it's a fifth column, and they have the plan to control the world. That is anti-Semitism.
And you all sort of disagree over the definition of Zionism a little bit, right? I mean, there's a moment in the book where you kind of have to stop talking to each other after October 7th.
Yeah, it's not over Zionism, it's over something else. But yeah,
but I mean, how do you define Zionism?
Well, I think the definition, especially as I listen to know, it's Jewish people's right to self-govern, self-determine, Israel's right to have a state, like Jewish people's right to have a state. And I think that is where, in the book, it wasn't a disagreement over the definition. It was more so like I don't like war, and I don't like what it takes for countries to exist. Now, mind you, every country has had to go through that process of existence. And so, obviously, I believe in Jewish people's right to have a state. But with Noah, the tension and the friction came, I was like, but wait, Noah, what about war? What about, but what about this? But what about blood? What about this? What about this? What about displacement? Like, so many things that my small mind, if you will, has a hard time wrestling with and grasping. But chapter 16, how the book almost didn't happen, that was when the book completely fell apart. Noah and I stopped talking for 3 weeks because we have such a sharp disagreement on a matter. It wasn't Zionism, but on a matter.
It was over this idea of you talking to somebody who she interpreted as pro-Hamas, right, and who you should be talking to.
Interpreted.
Yeah, okay, but we don't need to bring it up all again. But that's where some of that came from. And so for you, but you think that on this Zionism issue, and we look at these college campus protests, and you hear people, I'm not against Jews, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist, right? And they say that what's happening with the Israeli government is wrong. What do you say to that?
First of all, does any of them know what the definition of Zionism is? And I would venture to say that they don't. The definition of Zionism is very simple. In simple words, as Emmanuel said, it's Israel's right to exist. Jewish people's right to have a state. That's the most simple. In a little bit more, a little bit more nuanced way, it's the Jewish people's right for self-governance and self-determinations in some parts of their ancestral land, and in a Jewish, not an exclusively Jewish state. And that is the thing that they don't understand. They think Zionism means racism. They think that Zionism means imperialism. It doesn't mean any of these things. Anti-Zionism doesn't mean that you can't be critical of the Israeli government. That is totally fine. If you say that I don't like the Israeli government, that is totally, there's nothing Zionist, there's nothing anti-Semitic about that. But if you deny the Jewish people's right to exist, and you only deny one people's right to exist, there's a name for that.
You know, Emmanuel, it's really interesting because you look at the history between our people, and I'm a Jew, and I use the word Jew, which we've talked about, but that you look back in the 60s, and when Martin Luther King Jr. came to Southern California, he was embraced in a big way by the Jewish community. Here's a picture of him at Temple Israel in Southern California. He spoke at several different Jewish places of worship. We know many of the freedom riders who went down and were beaten up and were crusading for civil rights were Jews, many of them Jews from Southern California. And yet we see there is tension right now between blacks and Jews. What happened there?
In my opinion, I think a few things. I think, number one, in America, we simplify so many things into black and white. And that's wrong. We're simplifying it to the lowest common denominator of black and white. And there is no greater polarization, particularly being videographed, social media, between the black and white community than right now. And if we couple the Jewish community as the white community, because non-Jewish people, for the most part, interpret Jewish people as being white, and there's tension between the black community and the white community, there has to be tension between the black community and the Jewish community, because Jewish people are white. Which is why, quite literally, we penned a chapter, so are Jewish people white?
And the answer is yes.
And the answer is to
No.
But that's the answer.
You're a Jew. That's the funny, that's why everybody needs to read.
Because Jews are more than just a religion, it's also seen as a race by a lot of people. When you go on 23andMe, I did the test and it told me I was 99% Ashkenazi Jew.
Right.
And I was like, I needed a DNA test to tell me that? But it's not going to tell you you're Catholic.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's the difference.
Right. So, but that is true, by the way, for some Ashkenazi Jews that actually can trace down to this little village of 300 families, which is really interesting. But Judaism, being Jewish, it's not just a religion, it's an ethno-religion, it's a tribe. It's its own thing. So it's its own ethnicity. So when Emmanuel and I were talking about it, I was like, yes, I understand. I'm white passing. I look like a white person. But I'm not as privileged. I'm privileged today in the world, in America today, but like the privilege that the Jewish community has also includes having my entire extended family perish in the Holocaust and not being allowed to own land, not being allowed to hold certain jobs. Like we have a history that, once you put it, to Emmanuel's point, once you put our history through the prism of color, black or white, through the prism of oppressor and oppressed, through the prism of melanin in the skin, the Jewish community just doesn't fit. Just doesn't fit.
What have you learned about Jews culturally that surprised you?
Man, surprise, I won't use the word surprise, but I think the biggest thing I've learned is the generational trauma and how it impacts the present perspective. And we all have different generational traumas. If you don't understand someone's trauma, you don't understand how to best navigate around that. And when I was talking about Jewish people in power, Elex, you and I have had the conversation privately, I'll have it now with the audience publicly. I said, wait a second. The owner of the team that drafted me in 2012 to the National Football League, the Cleveland Browns, he was a Jewish man. Then I was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2013. He was a Jewish man. I left the NFL in 2016. My first agent on television was a Jewish woman. So how is it offensive when I say that Jewish people are in power? But in talking to Noa and having an uncomfortable conversation, she reminded me so often people would use the concept of Jewish power to say we need to get the Jews out of power, thus the Holocaust, along with pogroms, along with so many other things that have been a detriment to the Jewish people. So learning about the trauma historically helps me better understand how to navigate conversations to better live life and live in this world with people that don't live.
And what's been your biggest surprise about black culture?
First of all, that's such a beautiful thing to say. This is so moving for me personally, I'm sure for a lot of our viewers, to have somebody from outside of our community who has no stakes in the game to insert yourself that way and learn so much. The way he's describing it is just, it's very moving. I think it was very similar. Through that conversation of the white and the black communities in America, I was able to see also the animosity of the black community for the Jewish community that are white passing, that we have the ability to hide our Jewishness and to benefit from the privileges of white Americans, which the black community just doesn't have. So I always say that being Jewish in America these days is like don't ask, don't tell. Like as long as you're not saying that you're Jewish, you're fine. And
Right.
to Emmanuel's point, the black community can't do that.
You're right.
So
There's rooms
yeah.
I can walk into where people don't know I'm Jewish, but there's no room you can walk into where people don't know you're black.
Well said.
And how
Unless they're
important
blind,
is that
of
to have
course.
this conversation
it's so
in
important.
America today?
And so we end with something fun. This is our personal issues game. This is where we'll see if you have any cultural similarities. Okay, this is 30 seconds on the clock. First thing that comes to mind, go fast, okay? What is your favorite meal?
Oh my God, chocolate, any kind of chocolate.
Favorite meal?
Lasagna.
Okay, who's your favorite musical artist?
Kirk Franklin.
God, I can't. I would say classic Madonna and also Gidi Gov. There's an Israeli artist who's old school. that I'm
Favorite
obsessed
TV
with.
show? You may be biased
Ever?
there. Yeah.
Oh God, it's Friends. I'm sorry. I know. I can't. I can't.
I'm gonna say Breaking Bad.
Oh, great show.
Much better.
Favorite athlete?
Steph Curry.
This is weird. Agnes Kelly.
Oh my God.
Ah,
I thought you were going to say Emmanuel Acho. Come on.
He's my favorite person.
Yeah, and last question, favorite thing about each other?
Oh.
Man, Noah's boldness. Her boldness. It's impeccable.
Oh, you're awesome.
What do you think?
Everything, like literally, what is not to love? Like the entire thing. Your curiosity and your ability to be kind of like a mercurial in a good way, to listen, move back, move forward, move back, and your emotional intelligence.
Well, we end
Nobody's ever asked us that.
I love it. We end with music, Waiting on the World to Change, John Mayer, because the only way for the world to change is if we have uncomfortable conversations. Emmanuel Noah, thank you for doing the important work. We
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Go buy the book. It's worth it.